Tell them the part where you threw her out, Caleb. The sentence cut through the ballroom before the applause even finished. For one frozen second, every champagne glass, every polite smile, every camera flash inside the Whitmore Foundation gala seemed to stop in midair. Caleb Whitmore stood under the white spotlight with his hand wrapped around a crystal award, looking like the kind of man people trusted before they ever checked the truth. His tuxedo fit perfectly. His smile was warm enough for donors, soft enough for cameras, and broken just enough to make people believe he had suffered. Beside him, Madison Vale touched his arm like she was holding together a wounded hero. Across the ballroom, near the back wall, Tasha Coleman stood alone in a simple black dress, her fingers tightening around the thin strap of her purse. She had not come for attention. She had not come to beg, explain, or ruin anyone's night. She came because the invitation had been mailed to her old apartment with Caleb's handwriting on the envelope, the same careful handwriting he used on anniversary cards back when he still knew how to pretend love was real. On stage, Caleb lowered his eyes in that practiced way that always made people lean closer. "A year ago," he said, voice shaking just enough, "I lost my marriage. I lost the woman I thought would stand beside me. And I learned that sometimes the people you love most can walk away when life gets hard." A soft wave of sympathy moved through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Poor Caleb." Tasha felt the words hit her harder than they should have. Poor Caleb. Not the woman who packed his father's prescriptions at 2 in the morning. Not the woman who covered payroll when his first company was 3 days from collapse. Not the woman who slept in her car after he changed the locks and told everyone she had left on her own. Madison turned slightly, scanning the room until she found Tasha. Her smile grew smaller, sharper. "We all heal in different ways," Madison said into the microphone, sweet as iced tea and twice as cold. "Some people choose grace. Some choose bitterness." A few guests glanced back at Tasha. One woman looked her up and down like she already knew the whole story. Tasha swallowed, but her throat felt tight. Her body remembered that night before her mind could stop it. The rain, the suitcase, the porch light clicking off. Caleb's voice through the door saying, "You'll regret making me look bad." But she did not cry. She did not move. Because what Caleb never understood was that silence was not the same thing as surrender. At a table near the front, Grace Whitmore, Caleb's mother, sat with both hands folded around a phone so old its case had cracked at the corner. She had watched her son lie for 12 months. She had watched Tasha carry the blame like a coat soaked through with rain. And now, as Caleb lifted his glass and said, "To second chances," Grace looked at Tasha from across the room. There was apology in her eyes. There was fear too. But underneath both, there was finally something stronger. Truth. Caleb raised his glass higher, smiling like the whole room belonged to him. "Tonight," he said, "we move forward." That was when Grace pushed back her chair. The sound was small, just wooden legs scraping against polished floor, but somehow it reached every corner of the ballroom. Caleb's smile flickered. Madison's hand froze on his sleeve. Tasha's heart began to pound, slow and heavy. Grace stood, clutching that old phone like it weighed more than the award in Caleb's hand. Then she looked at her son and said, clearly enough for the nearest tables to hear, "No, Caleb. Tonight, we tell them what really happened." Grace did not always have the courage to stand up. That was the part Tasha knew better than anyone, because there had been a time when Grace saw everything and still chose the comfort of silence. A year earlier, before the ballroom, before the whispers, before Caleb learned how profitable pity could be, Tasha Coleman was still trying to save a marriage that had already started leaving her behind. She woke up before sunrise most mornings in their small house outside Atlanta, packed Caleb's lunch because he said takeout made him feel sluggish, answered emails for her freelance clients, then drove 20 minutes across town to check on Caleb's father after his knee surgery. Grace used to open the door with tired eyes and say, "Baby, you do too much." And Tasha would smile, because that was easier than admitting nobody else was doing enough. Caleb was always busy back then. Busy chasing investors. Busy taking calls in the driveway. Busy telling people his company was finally about to break through. When bills came in, he called it pressure. When Tasha paid them from her savings, he called it partnership. She never posted about it. She never held it over him. She believed love meant covering each other when life got heavy. Then the money started coming in, and Caleb changed in a way that was quiet at first. New suits. New dinners. New friends who laughed too loudly at jokes that were not funny. Madison Vale appeared at a networking event in Midtown with glossy hair, a perfect smile, and the kind of confidence that made men like Caleb feel larger just by standing beside her. She works in brand strategy, Caleb told Tasha one night, looking at his phone instead of his wife. She understands image. Tasha looked up from folding his father's insurance papers. And I do not. Caleb sighed, not angry, just bored. Somehow that hurt worse. That is not what I said. But it was what he meant. By spring, he was staying out later. His shirt smelled like expensive hotel soap. His phone started sleeping face down. Tasha noticed because women always notice before men think they do. She did not scream. She did not search his pockets. She waited for him to respect her enough to tell the truth. Then one afternoon, a receipt landed in the shared email account. 2 nights at a hotel in Buckhead. Room service for 2. Champagne. A late checkout. Tasha sat at the kitchen table staring at the screen, while Caleb's father slept in the next room, and Grace washed dishes with the faucet running too loud. Tasha, Grace asked softly. Tasha turned the laptop around. Grace read it once, then again, and her face folded in on itself. Maybe it is not what it looks like, she whispered, but even she did not believe it. That night, Tasha waited until Caleb came home. He walked in smiling at something on his phone, then stopped when he saw the printed receipt on the counter. For a second, the mask slipped. Not guilt. Irritation. You went through my email? He asked. Tasha's hands were cold, but her voice stayed steady. It is our email, Caleb. Tell me it is not Madison. He laughed once, low and cruel. You always do this. You make everything ugly. She stared at him, stunned by how fast he turned his betrayal into her behavior. I gave you everything, she said. I stood by you when nobody else would. Caleb leaned closer, his eyes flat. And who is going to believe that, Tasha? Who is going to believe you over me? That was the first time she understood he was not just cheating. He was preparing a story. And in that story, she was never meant to survive as anything but the villain. By the next morning, Caleb was not acting like a man who had been caught. He was acting like a man who had already hired a publicist. Tasha sat at the kitchen table with the hotel receipt between them, waiting for shame to appear on his face. But Caleb only paced the room in his white dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, phone in his hand, jaw tight with annoyance. You do not understand what you are doing, he said. You are emotional right now. Tasha looked at him for a long moment. I am not emotional because I found the truth. I am emotional because you still think I am stupid. That made his eyes sharpen. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but Tasha saw it. She had spent years learning the weather of his moods, the small changes before the storm. Careful, he said. You are making this harder than it has to be. She almost laughed. Harder for whom? For the man who lied? Or the woman expected to swallow it quietly, so he could keep his clean image? Caleb did not wait for an answer. Within 48 hours, the call started. First, a woman from church who left a voicemail saying she was praying for Tasha's peace. Then one of Caleb's business friends texted, I hope you get help before this gets worse. Tasha read the message 3 times, confused, until she opened social media and saw Madison's post. It was not direct. That was what made it dangerous. A soft focus photo of Madison holding a coffee cup, captioned with a quote about surviving jealous people who cannot celebrate your growth. No names. No facts. Just enough poison for everyone to sip and call it wisdom. Caleb followed with his own version a week later. He told friends Tasha had become controlling. He said she hated his success. He said she wanted to punish him for moving forward. He never mentioned the hotel receipt, the late nights, the money she had poured into his company, or the way she had helped bathe his father when Caleb said he had meetings. He cut the marriage into pieces and rearranged them until he looked wounded and she looked unstable. The worst part was how easily people accepted it. At the grocery store, a neighbor who used to hug Tasha near the produce section suddenly turned down another aisle. At a client meeting, a woman who had promised her a contract smiled politely and said they were going in a different direction. Even Grace stopped calling for a while. That silence hurt in a place Tasha did not know still had feeling. She would sit in her car outside the house she once decorated, staring at the porch where she had planted lavender, and wonder how a woman could give years of her life to a family and still be erased before the paint dried. One Friday evening, Caleb sent her a message. You should stop trying to make me the villain. People are worried about you. Tasha stared at the words until they blurred. Her hands were shaking, but she did not reply. She placed the phone face down, opened a folder on her laptop, and began saving everything. Screenshots, receipts, bank transfers, emails, photos of invoices paid from her account. She did not know yet how she would use them, only that the truth deserved a place to live before Caleb buried it completely. Across town, Caleb was already telling the next version of the story in a private dining room full of investors. Madison sat beside him, glowing under warm lights, nodding as he described the painful end of his marriage. Sometimes, he said, lowering his voice, you have to love someone from a distance when they refuse to heal. The table went quiet with sympathy. Madison reached for his hand. You tried, she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Caleb looked down like a man carrying grief. But at the far end of that same restaurant, Grace Whitmore stood near the hostess stand, frozen with her coat still on. She had come to pick up dinner for her husband. Instead, she heard her son turn Tasha's sacrifice into sickness, her loyalty into obsession, her heartbreak into a weapon against her. Grace stepped backward before Caleb could see her. Her fingers tightened around the old phone in her purse, the one with the cracked case, the one Caleb had once borrowed and forgotten to erase. For the first time, she understood that her son was not defending himself. He was building a cage around an innocent woman and asking the whole city to help him lock it. Grace drove home that night with the takeout bag cooling on the passenger seat and her hands locked so tightly around the steering wheel that her knuckles ached. Atlanta traffic crawled past her in red lines of brake lights, but she barely saw the road. All she could hear was Caleb's voice in that restaurant, soft and wounded, telling strangers that Tasha had refused to heal. Grace had known her son could be selfish. She had known he liked praise more than truth. But hearing him turn Tasha into a warning story, after everything that woman had done for their family, made something inside Grace shift. When she got home, her husband, Walter, was asleep in his recliner with the television murmuring low. The house smelled like medicine, lemon cleaner, and the pot roast Tasha used to make on Sundays when Caleb was too busy to visit. Grace stood in the hallway for a long time, looking at the framed family photos on the wall. There was Caleb at his college graduation, Caleb cutting the ribbon at his first office, Caleb smiling beside Tasha at Thanksgiving, his arm around her waist, her eyes tired but proud. Grace touched the frame with 2 fingers and whispered, I am sorry, baby. She did not know whether she meant it for Tasha or for the version of Caleb she had failed to raise. Upstairs, in the back of her closet, Grace kept an old shoebox full of chargers, Christmas cards, and phones nobody used anymore. She pulled it down, sat on the edge of the bed, and found the cracked black phone Caleb had borrowed months before the divorce. He had used it when his own phone shattered during a business trip. He gave it back in a hurry, laughing and saying, Do not worry, Mom. I cleaned it out. But Caleb had always been careless with things he thought did not matter. Grace charged it beside her lamp and waited. The screen came on after a few minutes, dim and scratched. At first, there were only old photos, blurry pictures of Walter's prescriptions and grocery lists. Then Grace opened the voice memos by accident and froze. One file had no name, just a date. She pressed play. Caleb's voice filled the bedroom, low and irritated. Madison, I told you. Nobody is going to believe Tasha if she starts talking. She looks bitter already. We just need to make sure people hear our version first. Grace stopped breathing. The room felt suddenly too small. She played it again, then again, each time hoping she had misunderstood. She had not. There were more things on the phone too. A short clip from the front porch security camera automatically, saved to an app Caleb forgot was still logged in. Tasha standing outside with a suitcase at her feet. Rain falling hard enough to blur the porch light. Caleb's figure in the doorway, his face half hidden, his voice clear enough to cut through the storm. You want drama, Tasha? Fine. Go be dramatic somewhere else. Then the door closed. Grace covered her mouth with one hand, not from shock alone, but from shame. Because she remembered that night. Tasha had called her once, just once, and Grace had not answered. Caleb had told her not to get involved. He said Tasha was trying to manipulate the family. Grace had believed the safer story because it cost her less. For weeks after that, she kept the phone hidden in her nightstand. She would take it out, listen to the evidence, then put it back like a sin she was not ready to confess. She thought about calling Tasha, but what would she say? Sorry I let my son bury you alive because I was afraid of losing him. Sorry I watched people spit on your name and called it family loyalty. So she stayed quiet until the invitation to the Whitmore Foundation Gala arrived, glossy and expensive, with Caleb's smiling face on the program. Grace read the line under his photo 3 times, honoring resilience after personal betrayal. That was the moment her fear finally turned into disgust. She called Tasha the next morning from a grocery store parking lot because she could not bring herself to do it from home. When Tasha answered, her voice was guarded. Grace. Grace gripped the phone with both hands. I have something you need to hear. There was silence on the other end, long enough for Grace to hear her own heartbeat. Then Tasha said quietly, Why now? Grace closed her eyes. Because I should have told the truth when it still could have saved you pain. I cannot undo that. But I can stop helping him hurt you. Tasha did not cry. She did not thank her. She only said, Bring it to the gala. And Grace, for the first time in a year, did not choose the easy lie. By the time Grace stood up inside the Whitmore Foundation Gala, Tasha already knew what it cost her. The room had gone quiet in that strange way rich rooms do when something uncomfortable interrupts the show. Nobody coughed. Nobody laughed. Even the string quartet near the marble columns let the music fade into a thin, nervous silence. Caleb kept his glass raised for half a second too long, like his body had not caught up with the danger yet. Then he lowered it slowly and gave his mother the soft warning smile Tasha remembered from family dinners. The one that said, Do not embarrass me. Mom, Caleb said into the microphone, light and careful, this is not the time. Grace stood beside her chair, clutching the old phone in both hands. She looked smaller than she had a year ago, but not weaker. There was something steady in her face now, something Caleb could not charm away. Madison leaned toward the microphone with a bright little laugh. Grace, sweetheart, emotions are high tonight. Maybe we should all take a breath. The way she said sweetheart made Tasha's stomach tighten. It was sweet on the surface, rotten underneath. A few people smiled politely, relieved to have permission to pretend this was only an awkward family moment. Then Madison turned her eyes toward the back of the room, right where Tasha stood. And Tasha, she added, her voice smooth as polished glass. We all truly hope you find peace someday. Holding on to anger this long cannot be healthy. There it was. The same old knife, wrapped in concern. Heads turned. Cameras shifted. Tasha felt every stare land on her skin, every judgment dressed up as curiosity. Her fingers tightened around her purse strap until the edge pressed into her palm. For a moment, the old instinct rose in her chest, the need to explain, defend, prove she was not the woman Caleb had painted for them. But she had learned something during that long year of being misunderstood. People who enjoy the lie will punish you for interrupting it. So Tasha walked forward slowly, not rushed, not trembling, just one step, then another, across the polished floor Caleb had expected her to cross in shame. Madison's smile flickered when Tasha stopped a few feet from the stage. Caleb looked down at her with the calm arrogance of a man who still believed he owned the room. Tasha, he said, lowering his voice like he was comforting her. Please do not do this to yourself. Tasha looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in months, his face did not break her heart. It only reminded her how expensive a lie could become when enough people invested in it. Do you want to tell them the truth? She asked, her voice clear enough for the front tables to hear. Or should someone else do it? A murmur moved through the crowd. Caleb's jaw tightened. Madison gave a small laugh, but it came out thin. Truth, Caleb repeated. Tasha, this is exactly what I mean. You are still trying to turn a private failure into a public scene. Tasha did not blink. You made it public when you built your comeback on my name. His eyes hardened for one quick second, and there he was, the man from the doorway, the man behind the speeches. I have been patient with you, he said. I have protected your dignity more than you know. Grace's voice cut in from beside her table. No, Caleb. She is asking because I told her I would stop lying for you. This time, nobody pretended not to hear. Caleb turned toward his mother, so sharply his award slipped slightly in his hand. What did you say? Grace stepped into the aisle, her old phone glowing in her palm. I said I am done helping you punish the woman who kept this family standing when you were too selfish to notice. Madison's face went pale beneath her makeup. Caleb tried to laugh, but the sound had no air in it. Mom, you are confused. Grace looked at him with the tired sadness of a mother seeing her son clearly at last. No, she said. I was confused when I believed you. Tonight, I am not. Tasha stood still as the room shifted around her. Not fully on her side yet. Not completely against Caleb, but unsettled. Doubt had entered the ballroom, and doubt was all the truth needed to find a door. Caleb stepped away from the microphone, lowering his voice. Give me that phone. Grace held it closer to her chest. You had a year to tell the truth gently, she said. Now they are going to hear it clearly. And for the first time that night, Caleb Whitmore looked at Tasha Coleman not like a man facing a bitter ex-wife, but like a man who had just realized the witness he forgot to fear had been sitting at his own table. Grace did not walk to the stage like someone looking for attention. She walked like someone carrying a burden she should have put down a long time ago. Every step seemed to pull another layer of warmth out of the ballroom. Caleb stood near the microphone, his face tight, one hand slightly extended as if he could still stop her without looking afraid. Mom, he said, quieter now. Do not make a mistake you cannot fix. Grace looked at him, and the sadness in her eyes was worse than anger. That is what I told myself for a year, she said, and it made me part of the mistake. A low murmur moved through the tables. Madison reached for Caleb's arm, but he shook her off without looking. Tasha noticed that. So did Madison. For the first time all night, the perfect fiancé looked less like a partner and more like someone standing too close to a fire. Grace handed the phone to a young man near the sound table. Can you connect this? She asked. The young man looked at Caleb, then at the crowd, then at Grace. His face said he knew this would cost someone something. Still, he took the phone. Caleb stepped forward. Absolutely not. Tasha lifted her chin. Why not? He turned on her fast. Because this is not your circus. Her voice stayed even. No, it was my life. That landed. Not loudly, but deeply enough that a woman in the front row lowered her champagne glass. Grace took the microphone with both hands. They trembled, but her voice did not. My son has told many of you that Tasha left him when his company was struggling. That is not true. She paid vendors from her personal savings. She sat with my husband through doctor appointments. She brought groceries to our house every Tuesday. She kept records because Caleb always promised he would pay her back. Caleb laughed once, sharp and empty. This is ridiculous. Grace kept going. He also told you she became unstable after the divorce. That is not true either. She became quiet because every time she spoke, he used her pain as proof against her. Tasha felt something loosen in her chest, something she had carried so long she had mistaken it for part of her body. Nobody had said it that plainly before. Nobody had said it where Caleb could not edit it. The speakers crackled. Caleb's voice filled the ballroom. Not polished, not wounded, not careful. Just irritated and cruel. Madison, I told you. Nobody is going to believe Tasha if she starts talking. She looks bitter already. We just need to make sure people hear our version first. The room changed in one breath. A man near the bar whispered, "Oh my God." Someone else said Caleb's name like a question. Madison's lips parted, but no words came out. Caleb looked at the sound table, then back at his mother, and for once he had no speech ready. Tasha stood still, but inside her, the past year flashed by in pieces. The grocery store aisle where a neighbor avoided her. The canceled contracts. The late nights saving screenshots with shaking hands. The way people had looked at her like she was a storm they hoped would pass. Now the storm had a voice, and it was his. Grace swallowed hard. There is more, she said. Caleb's face drained. Mom, stop. Grace looked at him with tears in her eyes, but she did not stop. You stopped being my little boy the day you decided a woman's reputation was acceptable collateral for your comfort. The young man at the sound table touched the screen again. This time, the ballroom's large display flickered from the gala logo to a dark porch lit by rain and a yellow porch light. Tasha's breath caught. She knew that night before the video even moved. She knew the suitcase at the bottom of the steps. She knew the shape of herself standing there, soaked, stunned, still waiting for the man inside the house to remember she was human. Around her, the crowd leaned forward. Caleb whispered something under his breath, but it was too late. The truth was no longer waiting for permission. The video began without sound, which somehow made it worse. On the ballroom screen, rain poured over the front steps of the house Tasha had once called home. The porch light flickered against the wet brick, turning the night yellow and gray. Then Tasha appeared in the frame, smaller than she remembered feeling, standing beside a suitcase with one broken wheel. She had no coat. Her hair was damp around her face. In one hand, she held a folder against her chest like it was the last solid thing in the world. The crowd watched in silence. Nobody shifted in their chair now. Nobody looked at Tasha like she was dramatic. Caleb stood near the stage with his mouth slightly open, staring at the screen as if the footage had betrayed him personally. In the video, the front door opened. Caleb stepped into view, warm light behind him, clean shirt, dry hair, a man comfortable enough to be cruel because he thought no one was watching. His voice came through the speakers, rough but clear. "You want to make me look bad? Then go explain yourself somewhere else." Tasha's voice on the recording was low, almost swallowed by the rain. "Caleb, my laptop is still inside. My work files are in there." He gave a short laugh. "You should have thought about that before turning my house into a courtroom." Someone in the ballroom gasped. Tasha did not look at them. She kept her eyes on the screen, even though every second felt like reopening a wound in front of strangers who had helped keep it infected. Then Madison appeared behind Caleb in the doorway, wearing his gray college sweatshirt, her arms folded, her face bored. She did not shout. She did not need to. She looked at Tasha like a package left on the wrong porch. "This is embarrassing," Madison said in the video. "For everyone." Caleb turned back to Tasha. "You heard her. Leave." The door closed. The porch went dark except for the rain and Tasha's still body at the bottom of the steps. The clip ended, and for a moment the ballroom held its breath. Then sound rushed back all at once. Chairs scraped. People whispered. A reporter near the side wall lifted her phone. One of Caleb's investors, a tall man in a navy suit who had praised Caleb 10 minutes earlier, stood up slowly and walked toward the exit without saying a word. That was the first crack. Then another guest stood. Then another. Caleb saw them, leaving, and panic finally broke through his face. "This is private footage," he snapped. "This is a family matter taken completely out of context." Tasha turned toward him. Her voice was quiet, but the microphone near Grace still caught it. "What context makes that better?" The question spread through the room like a match dropped on dry paper. Caleb had no answer. Madison stepped forward, trying to recover the version of herself people used to admire. "Tasha came there to start a fight," she said. "She was unstable. We were protecting ourselves." Grace looked at Madison with a coldness Tasha had never seen in her. "You were wearing my son's sweatshirt in my daughter-in-law's house while she stood outside in the rain. Do not insult this room by calling that protection." Madison's cheeks flushed. Caleb shot her a look, and Tasha noticed again how quickly he abandoned people when they stopped being useful. The screen changed to another file, not a video this time, but a bank statement. Then another. Then an email. Grace spoke into the microphone, slower now, each word landing with weight. Tasha paid the emergency vendor bill that kept Caleb's company from closing. She paid the mortgage twice when he told everyone he was carrying the household alone. She covered Walter's medical balance when Caleb said he was too stretched thin. Tasha could hear the low hum of disbelief around her, but this time it was not aimed at her. It was aimed at the man who had spent a year selling himself as the victim. Caleb stepped off the stage and moved toward Tasha, lowering his voice as though intimacy could still control her. "You do not know what you are doing," he said. "This will ruin everything." Tasha looked at the award in his hand, the donors frozen behind him, Madison trembling beside the stage, and Grace standing with tears on her face. Then she reached into her purse and touched the sealed envelope she had carried all night. "No, Caleb," she said. "This is the first honest thing that has happened here." Tasha pulled the envelope from her purse slowly, not because she wanted drama, but because her hands deserved one steady moment after a year of shaking in private. Caleb's eyes dropped to it, and something in his face changed. He did not know exactly what was inside, but men like Caleb could recognize danger when it came neatly organized. "Tasha," he said, softer now, almost gentle. "Let us not do something we cannot take back." She looked at him with a tired kind of calm. "You took my name, my work, my peace, and almost every person I thought knew me. I am not the one who needs to worry about taking things back." Madison stepped away from the stage, her perfect posture starting to collapse at the edges. "This is insane," she said. "You cannot just show up with papers and expect people to believe you." Tasha gave her a small look. That is exactly what Caleb did for a year. A low sound moved through the room, not laughter, not agreement, but recognition. Tasha opened the envelope and removed a stack of documents clipped with colored tabs. Before Caleb could reach for them, a woman in a cream pantsuit stepped through the side entrance of the ballroom. Her hair was pulled back, her expression calm, her briefcase tucked under one arm. Tasha turned toward her and felt her chest loosen. "This is my attorney, Denise Marshall," she said. Denise did not rush. She walked to Tasha's side with the quiet confidence of someone who did not need the room to like her. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "as of 6 o'clock this evening, formal notice has been delivered to your board, your investors, and your corporate counsel." Caleb blinked. Formal notice for what? Denise opened her briefcase. "Defamation, financial misrepresentation, and misuse of marital assets connected to your company's public funding materials." The words hit harder than shouting ever could. At the donor tables, people began checking their phones. One man whispered to another, then pushed back his chair. Madison looked at Caleb as if she was seeing the price tag on the life she had chosen. "That company exists because of me," Caleb said. "No," Tasha replied. "It survived because of me." Denise placed copies of bank transfers on the nearest table. Ms. Coleman contributed personal funds to cover vendor debt, operating expenses, and household obligations, while Mr. Whitmore represented himself as the sole financial backbone of both the company and the marriage. Grace closed her eyes, guilt crossing her face, but Tasha did not look away from Caleb. Not this time. Caleb leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she and the nearest guests could hear. "Tash, come on. We can talk about this like adults." The old nickname slid across her skin like something cold. For years, that voice had made her soften. Tonight, it only reminded her how many times he had used tenderness as a leash. "You do not get to whisper now," she said. "You had a microphone when you lied." A reporter near the back lifted her phone higher. Caleb noticed and straightened fast, trying to rebuild the man on stage. "This is a coordinated attack," he announced. "My ex-wife is working with my mother because she cannot accept that I moved on." Grace stepped forward, tears bright in her eyes. "Stop making women carry your shame, Caleb." The room went quiet again. This time, it was not shock. It was judgment. Madison took one careful step away from Caleb. He saw it and turned on her with his eyes before he could stop himself. Tasha caught that too. Everyone did. Denise handed Caleb a final document. "You are also being asked to preserve all messages, recordings, financial statements, and communications related to Ms. Coleman. Destruction of evidence will create additional consequences." Caleb stared at the paper like it was written in another language. The award in his hand suddenly looked ridiculous, a shiny object given to a man whose story had just collapsed under its own weight. Tasha slid the remaining documents back into the envelope. She did not smile. This was not happiness. It was something quieter, cleaner. Relief without forgiveness. Power without cruelty. She looked at Caleb one last time and said, "You wanted everyone to hear a story. Now they have the whole one." Then she turned away from him, and the room did something it had not done all night. It made space for her. 3 months later, Caleb Whitmore stood outside the same glass office building where people used to hold the elevator for him. Nobody stopped him now. His name had been removed from the lobby directory, his board seat was gone, and the company he once called his legacy was under review by people who did not care how charming he sounded in a tuxedo. Madison disappeared even faster than the donors did. 1 week she was defending him online. The next week her photos with Caleb were gone, replaced by captions about fresh starts and choosing peace. Tasha saw none of it as victory. Not really. Victory was too loud a word for what healing felt like. Healing was quiet. It was waking up without checking who had lied about her overnight. It was signing her own lease on a sunlit apartment 10 minutes from downtown Atlanta. It was buying lavender for the balcony because she still loved the smell, even if the old house no longer belonged to her. People started reaching out after the gala. Long texts. Careful apologies. "I should have asked your side. I believed him too fast. I hope you can forgive me." Tasha answered some. She ignored others. Peace, she learned, did not require reopening every door just because someone finally knocked politely. One Saturday morning, Grace asked to meet her at a small coffee shop near Piedmont Park. She looked older when she walked in, but lighter too. She sat across from Tasha and wrapped both hands around a paper cup. "I am sorry," Grace said. "Not just for being late. For knowing enough to wonder and still choosing not to ask." Tasha looked out the window at people walking dogs, parents pushing strollers, joggers moving through the Georgia heat like life had never stopped for anybody. I needed one person to tell the truth, she said softly. But I also needed to become someone who could live even if nobody did. Grace nodded, tears gathering, but Tasha did not rush to comfort her. That was new too. She could be kind without carrying everybody. Months later, Tasha started the Coleman Truth Fund, helping women rebuild after divorce, public shame, and reputations damaged by people who counted on their silence. She did not build it to punish Caleb. She built it because somewhere, another woman was sitting in her car with shaking hands, wondering if the truth mattered when nobody wanted to hear it. Tasha wanted her to know it did. On the day the foundation opened, Tasha stepped into a conference room filled with women who looked tired, nervous, hopeful. She placed her purse on the table, took a breath, and smiled. "You do not have to scream to be believed," she told them. "You do not have to bleed your pain in public to prove it happened. And you do not have to become cruel just because someone was cruel to you." Outside, Caleb watched from across the street for less than a minute before turning away. For the first time, Tasha did not feel the pull to look back. Some stories end when the villain loses everything. But the better ones end when the woman he tried to erase finally stops measuring her life by what he lost and starts living by what she knows she is worth.